Hello, and welcome to Historical Humans Reads, where we take primary sources and bring them to your screen. I'm Colum Coleman, and today we are reading from the Satyricon by Petronius. One of the most fully preserved Roman novels, the Satyricon provides a satirical portrait of the age of Nero. Interestingly, the Satyricon was written during the reign of Nero, the very empire whose high society it mocks, by the man who was arguably responsible for overseeing those social conventions. Petronius was a courtier and Consul of Rome who served as Nero's Arbiter of Elegance, the man who had final say on matters of social style and taste. Today we will be reading from Volume 2, The Dinner of Trimalchio of the Satyricon. With that, let's begin. Having put on our clothes in the meantime, we commenced to stroll around and soon, the better to amuse ourselves, approached the circle of players. All of a sudden we caught sight of a bald-headed old fellow, rigged out in a russet-colored tunic, playing ball with some long-haired boys. It was not so much the boys that attracted our attention, although they might well have merited it, as it was the spectacle afforded by this beslippered paterfamilias playing with a green ball. If one but touched the ground, he never stooped for it to put it back in play, for a slave stood by with a bagful from which the players were supplied. We noted other innovations as well, for two eunuchs were stationed at opposite sides of the ring, one of whom held a silver chamber pot, the other counted the balls. Not those which bounced back and forth from hand to hand in play, those which fell to the ground. While we were marveling at this display of refinement, Menelaus rushed up. "He is the one with whom you will rest upon your elbow," he panted. "What you see now is only a prelude to the dinner." Menelaus had scarcely ceased speaking when Trimalchio snapped his fingers. The eunuch, hearing the signal, held the chamber pot for him while he still continued playing. After relieving his bladder, he called for water to wash his hands, barely moistened his fingers, and dried them upon a boy's head. Going into details would take too long. We entered the bath finally. After sweating for a minute or two in the warm room, we passed through into the cold water. But, short as was the time, Trimalchio had already been sprinkled with perfume and was being rubbed down. Not with linen towels, however, but with cloths made from the finest wool. Meanwhile, three masseurs were guzzling Falernian under his eyes, and when they spilled a great deal of it in their brawling, Trimalchio declared that they were pouring a libation to his genius. He was then wrapped in a coarse scarlet wrap rascal and placed in a litter. Four runners, whose liveries were decorated with metal plates, preceded him, as also did a wheelchair in which rode his favorite, a withered, blear-eyed slave, even more repulsive looking than his master. A singing boy approached the head of his litter as he was being carried along and played upon small pipes the whole way, just as if he were communicating some secret to his master's ear. Marveling greatly, we followed and met Agamemnon at the outer door, to the post of which was fastened a small tablet bearing this inscription: "No slave to leave the premises without permission from the master. Penalty 100 lashes." In the vestibule stood the porter, clad in green, and girded with a cherry-colored belt, shelling peas onto a silver dish. Above the threshold was suspended a golden cage, from which a black and white magpie greeted the visitors. I almost fell backwards and broke my legs while staring at all this, for to the left as we entered, not far from the porter's alcove, An enormous dog upon a chain was painted upon the wall, and above him this inscription in capitals: Beware the dog. My companions laughed, but I plucked up my courage and did not hesitate, but went on and examined the entire wall. There was a scene in a slave market, the tablets hanging from the slaves' necks, and Trimalchio himself, wearing his hair long, holding a caduceus in his hand, entering Rome, led by the hand of Minerva. Then again, the painstaking artist had depicted him casting up accounts and still again being appointed steward, everything being explained by inscriptions. Where the walls gave way to the portico, Mercury was shown lifting him up by the chin to a tribunal placed on high. Nearby stood Fortune with her horn of plenty and the three fates spinning golden flax. I also took note of a group of runners in the portico, taking their exercise under the eye of an instructor, and in one corner was a large cabinet, in which was a very small shrine containing silver Lares, a marble Venus, and a golden casket, by no means small, which held, so they told us, the first shavings of Trimalchio's beard. I asked the hall porter what pictures were in the middle of the hall. The Iliad and the Odyssey, he replied, and the gladiatorial games given under Elegance. There was no time in which to examine them all. We had now come to the dining room, at the entrance to which sat a factor, receiving accounts, and, what gave me cause for astonishment, rods and axes were fixed to the doorposts, superimposed, as it were, upon the bronze beak of a ship, whereupon was inscribed, To Gaius Pompeius Trimalchio, Augustul Sevilla, from Cinemus his Stewart. A double lamp, suspended from the ceiling, hung beneath the inscription, and a tablet was fixed to each doorpost. One, if my memory serves me, was inscribed, On December 30th and 31st, our Gaius dines out. The other bore a painting of the moon in her phases and the 7 planets, and the days which were lucky and those which were unlucky, distinguished by distinctive studs. We had had enough of these novelties and started to enter the dining room when a slave, detailed to this duty, cried out, Right foot first. Naturally, we were afraid that some of us might break some rule of conduct and cross the threshold the wrong way. Nevertheless, we started out, stepping off together with the right foot, when all of a sudden a slave who had been stripped threw himself at our feet and commenced begging us to save him from punishment, as it was no serious offense for which he was in jeopardy. The steward's clothing had been stolen from him in the baths, and the whole value could scarcely amount to 10 sesterces. So we drew back our right feet and intervened with the steward, who was counting gold pieces in the hall, begging him to remit the slave's punishment. Putting a haughty face on the matter, It's not the loss I mind so much, he said, as is the carelessness of this worthless rascal. He lost my dinner clothes, given me on my birthday they were by a certain client, Tyrian purple too, but it had been washed once already. But what does it amount to? I make you a present of the scoundrel. He felt deeply obligated by his great condescension, and the slain slave for whom we had interceded rushed up to us as we entered the dining room, and to our astonishment kissed us thick and fast, voicing his thanks for our kindness. You'll know in a minute whom you did a favor for, he confided. The master's wine is the thanks of a grateful butler. At length we reclined, and slave boys from Alexandria poured water cooled with snow upon our hands, while others, following, attended to our feet and removed the hangnails with wonderful dexterity. Nor were they silent even during this disagreeable operation, but they all kept singing at their work. I was desirous of finding out whether the whole household could sing, so I ordered a drink. A boy near at hand instantly repeated my order in a sing-song voice, fully as shrill, and whichever one you accosted did the same. You would not imagine that this was the dining room of a private gentleman, but rather that it was an exhibition of pantomimes. A very inviting relish was bought out, for by now all the couches were occupied save only that of Trimalchio, for whom, after a new custom, the chief place was reserved. On the tray stood a donkey made of Corinthian bronze, bearing panniers containing olives, white in one, black in the other. 2 platters flanked the figure, on the margins of which were engraved Trimalchio's name and the weight of the silver in each. Dormice sprinkled with poppy seed and honey were served on little bridges, soldered fast to the platter, and hot sausages on a silver gridiron were underneath which were damson plums and pomegranate seeds. This has been an excerpt from the Satyricon on Historical Humans Reads. If you enjoyed this video and would like to hear more excerpts from original texts, please follow or subscribe to us on your platform of choice. If there's a work you would like to hear, be sure to like the video and leave a comment listing it below. Thank you for listening.